Mema etiefo ne ahwefo nyina akwa abasabre de ba channel so ha nimde news nsɛm a ɛkɔ so my Ghana mu jedi ka jedi hwɛ yɛ tena sese ya na kyerɛ sɛ nkyerɛmu no na yɛde ba sabre nsɛm no ɛdɔso na ɛkɔ so ɛwɔ my Ghana mu na sabre de abɛtɔ ya pono so no ɛno ɛmu nkyerɛmu na yɛtimi de bramu de na ɛkɔ de na ɛba de na esie ɛwɔ my Ghana mu gyebrɛ ne nyina no yɛmmɔra nsɛm na sɛ de nsɛm ne sitie no yɛmfa nkyerɛmu no ɛmfa mrama wɔmfi sɛ o hwɛ ne nyina no na o subscribe o like o comment na o share ama afoforo nso nsa atimi akabina atimi aboa na kyerɛ sɛ bibia nso atimi akɔsɛnkɔ nsɛm no mu ne hwɛ sɛ de nsɛm no esitie.
Yes, right from the top you see that he beckoned the Chief Justice to try and exchange pleasantries. That attempt was rebuffed and the Chief Justice did not give in kindly to that. From the top, you will not hear specifically what has been said. In fact, there are those who are down there who have sought to transcribe the argument, who said that the Chief Justice said, Mr. Sai, I will not be part of this. I'm fighting for not just myself, I'm fighting for the Constitution of the Republic. But we cannot independently confirm if those were the words she uttered from downstairs. But the suspended Chief Justice clearly did not take in kindly with the attempt for camaraderie between herself and the DAG who had come to court to argue against her case.
And then finally, the other matter relating to the Chief Justice's request before the court to allow this process to be telecast live. When would that also be heard?
Okay, so that goes into the main case. We expect that the processes will now be filed by both parties, and then on the basis of that, the court will issue some hearing notices. We do not expect that it will be heard at least until the end of June, when that matter may become ripe for hearing. But the interlocutory matters having been dealt with, injunctions and all that, that is the next thing to happen. But a specific date has not yet been set.
Make a cut and who said, Castle, I see a cancer. No, I didn't.
Say, Osha, latest a year, Mammy Torkornoo de buyer, or say she's against that. Then number two, or say, next time can it be say, petitioners no privileges be ono onibi. It is say yama petitioners no privilege man ye dia any ono so yama
na hona ni bayi say me pacho ye dia sama yedi no fan enya court
in fact committees are tisani nyina no omuhia o court premises
na agenti na yedi ko hye edem mu say obi aso waku niba why
oje no phone free ni
na dia mentia se kwan say
yabua no
ono petitioner no lawyers no petitioner say omo appear na mo dance for e beba aso what be that mampani ona roma
o say munyi no TV so no bia hwe bi so
obuo ni anidi am wo ma
o say dabi
Attorney General say the constitution is explicit on that.
O
say yen kano in camera.
Into mama no dey na omo be kan in camera omo yen kan public
o say
Attorney General on your press conference on your press conference on cases asana wako
say munti Attorney General o say case na da hon enye about
Torkornoo cases in the media
o say e Ghana mra de mra no kan mra no say yen kan
bacho Ghana mra no e kan find say Bangkok castle portion ben e kan say asam Bangkok castle portion ben me buru pa Attorney General me penasem pa is a fine gentleman obunu ho pa wo se makana fidie so Ira Mahama me penasem pa me mo sa kuwa we onu ma no emwa no
Fenaka Reverend
na duro enumi aduro no enwu no
efe bi so boa no
oh of course
enti fa ka ho preko na
so na odi aka ho ma me penasem ne boa no
so fa bebre so
ne boa no fa bebre so because na koma panti na mum saa de we de o mampani ede kan bi betu ni padua ho na ebe di wachi afebo ade asem nie nipa no muso waye bone wo tumi amudi na sem na asa ye bu ne kumfo bia yekokunu o se ka kasere ye kasere ro ko keke kra na e yan hihie o se kasere no ye de wo ko ha because o ye nim de asi homre bia atwa mu nti ana ye de wasem wo ko ha asa ye de obi akọ police station say man fan ko striking force na bujan for akọ fasting because obi anim de ekoso striking force wanti eno kra no ye
na striking force e da so
ayam hihie na ye de wo ko no ana se fan ko sukula omo nim se baabi wo ha ya hyeda ka se ehɔ nyɛ nti yɛ de nkɔfo a omo yɛ bad boys na de call na wo nim se wo nyɛ bad na yɛ de wo kɔ frasa nkɔfo no nti maame no obi a wo yɛ chief justice mu na ɔman no bɔ no ho ban sɛ ne yɛ kana sɛm a ɔne yɛ kana sɛm te sɛ bi o abɔfra bi a ɔyɛ a court attendant bi asɛ sɛbi common criminal bi David.
But na majority leader can be or say
David.
The adro na say ayemra na the chief justice ho ban ti enche aban de mra be court
na ya yiri bia na ayemra de abo bi ho ban enye yi hwe nana me maame no nsema wo ka no ene Torkornoo enti bia e be ka se yemfani no se okɔ no ne lawyer na ye sim 7 nkrata on her behalf no ye she data say man for na to
only chambers kwa no invitation no ko yo
yes
see you recognize no say oye
bacho ye nua pani ye offer Poaman yes and friend
Gabriel Scott Poaman JS
I don't know he's only acting
on
committee
on the sin ye hu nana emre yin nkaso emre bie ni ho yidi kaso in fact the name who videos and MPP for comes am say hey Emre Dani ekro bi din and then pa na MPP for na come say ye bu onwi because under 5 months ago na no mtia bem
enru kra papa bia
na think of bi ni sa when those wrongs
were happening
and then for man ye offer Dennis and san friend wa
adibu asiedu anade hin
asiedu
adibu asiedu
mun kan hu se emre wo hoi ye ninkaso ninkaso ma ye boni bia o but de mu susukuru no amana na mu tu di ma amena hyemu no muntu amana obekom yie e mo tu amana ne hu betwitwi ansa na wura amana ne mu a e bia kyena na sa amana na kro na de wede e kwa kohyem na ene ye ono makase ye hwe maame no ne anhwe office na e be mistake because untimi nyi maame no free office no it is the office na aye under attack. It is the office of the chief justice that are under attack, not Torkornoo as chief justice. Inti me say na what na ba making kan a daily guide na e dey some na ko so Ghana say e dey ma say ni Ewura Mahama wada ru meburu say ye nim say I mean kwa wa bahi ni ma bebre o a e besesa even na he na no me call me on say soldier for bebre
na do be see o
pa na nipa akofie hu generous akofie me ha mania a doso papa
said that me kan ha about 50 of them
yes na
obi retirement
obi kan se mi kire me na se o ka kire me yem him so say rank we na me wo within 8 years time na me do ha nanti se nikodu ho wie na se MPP so ba na mka se ya NDC ni a na ombe yimi kofia na bra ma bra nyina me bra kosi sen aso ka kire me no enti in some no look I say ya nhwe ne ni anka ne yi a ana etuare nko etua edade mu na eda ebe patre si udi mu no wo ka mu no nya gyefo ti muma yenye careful oman na yenyina no de ye pese ye bia no
the court from the Supreme Court this afternoon. Chief Justice or suspended Chief Justice, if you like, Gertrude Torkornoo, is the leader of the judiciary. Lawyers bow to her, but today she stood and bowed before a panel of her equals as she made a last-minute ditch effort to stop the ongoing constitutional process to remove her from office. The Chief Justice wants the entire process stopped and the judges on the special committee removed, but her case has been dismissed unanimously. Now, a member of our legal affairs desk, Goku Asante, was in court and monitored proceedings for us, and he joins me in the studio. Goku, first, you're welcome back.
Yeah.
So let's start with, there were a matter that was first dealt with, the supplementary affidavits. First, walk us through.
So even before that, the Deputy Attorney General, Dr. Justice Shremsai, who represented his boss in court today, wanted the court to strike out the names of Justice Poaman, Justice Asiedu Adibu, Dom Levo, and the two other members of the committee from the writ. And if you look at the face of the writ, the Attorney General is the first defendant, and the 5 members of the Article 146 committee are the other members of the committee. And so according to the state, this case can be prosecuted without having to attach those persons in it.
Right.
But then Godfred Dame disagreed with that and said that they were seeking for certain reliefs that were directed specifically at those people. And that is why they had attached them as defendants in the matter. The court found favor in the argument made by Godfred Dame and then dismissed the objection of the Deputy Attorney General and said the names of these 5 members of the committee must stay on the writ. Then came the matter of the supplementary affidavit. And Elton, in the last few days, we have been talking about that supplementary affidavit filed by the Chief Justice herself,
right,
which talks about what she believes to be degrading treatment of her, including going to the committee and being body searched and her phones being taken, family members not being allowed, the judges proceeding, the committee proceeding to hear the matters, despite the pendency of her injunction application and all that.
But and yesterday, for example, the lawyer who is representing her, Godfred Dame, on Top Story said that she was actually searched by a mail.
A mail. And so these were all the arguments that had been deposed to in the affidavit by the suspended Chief Justice herself, and it formed part of a case requesting the Supreme Court to injunct the entire process. And so that is the case that the Attorney General made, that Article 146 contains that the entire process must be held in camera.
Right.
And there must be confidentiality. And that the Chief Justice, having deposed to affidavits and putting them before the court, and which court documents are public documents, is the Chief Justice's way of using the back door to publicize the arguments that will be made at a committee that must be in camera.
Right.
And so that is the argument he made and urged on the court to strike out the entirety of the affidavits that have been sworn to by the suspended Chief Justice.
Because what? The court was blind to what about is happening.
Exactly. His argument is that the entire process must be confidential and no one else must know about it until it ends. And if persons are minded to so challenge the process in court, then they may do so. But Godfred Dame argued that matters having to do with even searches and all that do not constitute part of the proceedings of the Article 146 committee. But it appears some members of the committee had taken of the Supreme Court had taken the view that they actually form part of the committee's work. And so Godfred Dame pivoted with the argument a little bit and said, even if it were so, is it the argument that because this matter has the committee's work has to be in confidentiality, does it mean that if something goes on there that infringes on someone's right as a person and a constitutional right, they cannot go to the court to vindicate those rights? But ultimately, after the arguments were made, the court took about 5 minutes break to deliberate on the arguments that have been made by both Godfred Dame and then the Deputy Attorney General, and then came out with another unanimous verdict that the entirety of the affidavits that have been sworn to by the Chief Justice ought to be struck out of the records of the court as far as this matter was concerned, because it breached the confidentiality and the in-camera principle inherent in the Article 146 proceeding.
Does that suggest that when it comes to the matter before the 5-member committee, the Supreme Court has no business, interfering with it? Is that what it means? It
would appear that is the suggestion of the Supreme Court. And by 12 June, when their full reasoned ruling comes out, we will see what arguments they advance to back that point they've made. But it would appear now that the point that has been made is that so long as the Article 146 committee's work has not been concluded, you cannot use any proceedings thereof as a basis to file any action in court. But before 12 June, we'll get to see the judgment of the Supreme Court and get to see the arguments advanced on that. And then came the time for the substantive argument.
The injunction application.
The injunction application. And
I want us to clarify this. So this injunction application that was before the court, this is different from another suit that is demanding that the entire process be telecast live.
Yes, and in fact, the action that this process must be telecast is the main suit that the Chief Justice had filed.
Right.
And then on top of the main suit, she had filed for an injunction application.
Saying that you should determine this before any other matter
before we get into some of those matters. And the basis for this injunction application is that Godfred Dame on his feet argued, just as we've seen in the court documents, that Justice Gabriel Scott Porman, who is the chairman of the Article 146 committee set up by the president, actually in a ruling or in a certain judgment of the court, ruled in favor of one Daniel Ofori, who is one of the petitioners who is currently before the court.
And the matter between him and the Ecobank.
And the Ecobank. And then there's a matter of the police officer who said the court, the Chief Justice degraded him and ordered his arrest. And in fact, in his petition, he says he will call Justice Poorman as a witness in that matter.
The same Poorman who is the chair of this committee. And
so for which reason he says, then there is apparent bias in that matter, for which reason this is not a person that should be chairing that committee. That is for Justice Poorman. And then the court argued that there were a lot of questions from the bench that Justice Poorman in those cases was simply doing his work as a judicial officer, as a judge. And that if he ruled for Daniel Ofori, he did so on the merits of the case. And then the Chief Justice said, even he, acting Chief Justice Bafuboni said, asked Dabi, that even he who is on the panel, there have been cases involving Daniel Ofori that he has sat on it, together with Justice Omoru Tanko, who was on his left. Does that mean they are not even qualified to sit on this matter? And then the Chief Justice said, even the lawyer for the Chief Justice said, even Justice Kulendi is said to be one of the persons that Ofori will even call as a witness and all that in the petitions that have been filed. And so that have to do with Justice Poorman. Then there was Justice Asido Adibu. You recall that before the Chief Justice was suspended, she had put together a panel to hear Vincent Dekowasefua's case. And Justice Adibu Asido was part of the panel to hear that matter.
To determine whether the president should be injuncted from proceeding in the absence of the CJ having
been informed of the petitions and all that. But the president appointed Adibu Asido as a member of the panel, of the 5-member committee that's going to look into the matter. And the view of the Chief Justice and his lawyers were that infringed on judicial impartiality, because it would appear the president, knowing that the judge was on the court, decided to take him out and all that.